Sup nerds! Welcome back to my channel, guys. Welcome to my living room, everybody. obviously I wanted to just chill. That's my favorite kind of vibe for this channel. I love to just chill. I don't always have the opportunity to just film in my living room or whatever, so I kind of go where I can, and I love it. I think you guys like it, so we're just gonna keep going with it, kind of just chilling. Today we're talking about book slumps, if you guys didn't see the title, and just my personal experience with it and my thoughts about it. It's not like super, obviously I'm not this like expert on book slumps. I've been reading for a long time, but like I haven't been reading to the capacity that I've been reading this past like few months ever. So like obviously it's completely different now, and so I just kind of wanted to talk about them just a smidge bit, just a little. If you want to talk about them, or if you have any thoughts, definitely comment down below. First, if you guys like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. No, wait, that's wrong. First, if you guys like reading, if you guys like talking about books, if you guys like all the nerdy things, then definitely give this video a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button, and without further ado, let's just get started. Again, like I was saying, I just felt like I wanted to talk about my personal experience. I haven't been reading to this extent like this. I haven't been reading 13 books ever, like in my life, a month in my life ever. You know, it just doesn't happen. And so I really wanted to talk about this because here's the thing. Book slumps are not, there is no like true definition. Like a book slump is when you can't read for specifically 10 days at the most. Like it's not like that. So a book slump is just, you're basically have no motivation to read. Like you cannot seem to bring yourself to read. Let me find out, because I think I looked it up the other day, but I didn't like screenshot it. It says you're reading a book and suddenly you can't seem to get into it. You try reading for hours, but your mind won't focus. You might even start reading other books, but you can't seem to finish them either. This is called a reading slump. And so it's so, keep that in mind. Like my book slump, I felt like only lasted 5 days. Here's the thing. I could see my book slump coming from a mile away. All the books I was reading were just not hitting. They weren't hitting. And I'm like, I do think that it does have a lot to do with the books that I was reading. Like I'm not saying that the book was perfect and I was out of it. No, the book was definitely not like my favorite book or like what I really wanted to be reading, but I could feel myself disconnecting slowly until I was done. And I was like, oh, I'm not starting it. I tried to start books. I just couldn't seem to do it. I could find every excuse not to read, whereas obviously before that, I would find every excuse to read. So I also wanted to kind of give you to show you guys some books that I felt like, you know, why did I feel like I was going into this book slump? What I think contributed to it, basically, what didn't help me get out of it, and then what finally got me to read again. So real quick, because I wrote down a bunch of notes just so I had like stuff to, like, so I could focus my thoughts a little bit better. But again, I started loving fantasy. If you guys did not see, like I was reading only fantasy for a week, and I fell in love. Like I was just obsessed. Fantasy romance specifically. And I was hooked, addicted. Like I also though didn't have a lot of fantasy romance books. So the next books I was reading was only romance. And so I felt like obviously that's not what I wanted to be reading. And I don't feel like I'm necessarily a mood reader, but I do feel like maybe like a genre mood reader. I don't know, I guess that's what a mood reader is, but I don't feel like I'm a mood reader necessarily. Like I really think I could get myself into any book. And anyway, my point was just that like I knew that I wanted something with a little bit more action. So I was like, even if it was a romance book, I wanted it to be a lot more action. And again, not a lot of romance books are like that. You know, there are a few that again I'll show you, but like not many. I kept thinking about this too because I was like, I really did force myself to get through some romance books because again, I was filming a video reading booktuber recommendations, and they were all romance books and they were all really good books. But I feel like because I forced myself to do it, it kind of was like almost book burnout in a way. Like I was just kind of like fizzing out slowly. And obviously, of course, that's not everyone's experience because not everyone's on YouTube or like wants to make fun videos or like has to do certain things for videos. Like that's not everyone. But I feel, again, there's other stuff that I'll talk about that's not technically pertaining just to YouTube, but also like that could just be for any reason because the other thing that I wrote too is just like, you know, I buy a lot of books at a lot of times. Sometimes I do feel guilty if I buy so many books and I'm not reading the ones that I have. I'm like I could have saved how many dollars? Like probably $150 if I waited to buy the books until I finish like the other ones. Or if I waited until I was in the mood to read that book to buy, you know what I'm saying? So that's another thing that like I feel like also kind of like forced me to read other books that I didn't really want to read, but I was like, I bought them, like I paid money for these, and so I was like, I have to read them. I feel like that's a pretty normal like human reaction. It's like, wait, I bought it, so I gotta use it or I gotta read it, you know what I'm saying? And I kind of had to just keep telling myself, well, afterward, you know, I was kind of like, you know, why? Like, why does it matter? I wanted it, so I bought it at the time. I didn't read it, but it's either gonna get read and wait on and be on my bookshelf for years, or it's gonna be on my TBR cart for years before I read it. Like, is it much of a difference? No. I'm like, do you really think it's like that much of a difference here? Like to buy a book for $15. Like, what's the difference between reading it and not reading it? Basically, there's really nothing. Obviously, you get that information, but I just mean like, as far as like $15 go, you know, or $12, $10 goes, it's really not that serious to stress myself or like feel guilty about buying it and not reading it. Obviously, I don't want that to always be the case, but I know I'll get to it eventually, or I know I'll be in the mood for it too eventually, but I'd rather have it, especially if it's like on sale or something. I'd rather have it than have to wait to buy it, you know? So the next reason I feel like it kind of happened was also because I read so many good books that I felt like, and I feel like it was subconsciously. I subconsciously felt like nothing could beat it, and it was so hard. So I'm gonna talk about those books real quick, just so I honestly think that like, I'll give you how to get out of it. I'll give you how I think the best way to read these books and still continue other stuff is, but I'm gonna show you the books first. So first was obviously Fourth Wing. It's like kind of hard to not go on a book slump with this because what do you do after this book? What do? You could obviously start other fantasy series and stuff like that, which I would recommend. Stay in this realm of like fantasy and like you know, action and just this intensity that other books don't have. Like I would stay this or go, I mean, obviously do whatever feels right for you. That's what I should have done, is stayed in the fantasy realm. I think that would have helped me, but it's like, because there's no second book, and then she doesn't write, some authors kind of write in the same genre, and so like if I read one like book from Carissa Broadbent, and you know, I have to wait for the next book to come out, she has other fantasy books that I could just read, you know what I mean? And not even if they're necessarily in the same exact world, but I know that it's still fantasy, still Carissa Broadbent, like it's similar enough. Whereas Fourth Wing, this is the only like fantasy romance book she writes, I believe. And so I was looking at her other books, and so I just bought one actually the other day, but they're like regular books. They're not like whatever. So my point is just that like, it honestly feels like, where do I go from here? And that's kind of what I feel like that was the starter. This book didn't help. This is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I loved this book with all my freaking heart. It was so good, like so incredible. And I wanted to wait to read the second one because I had so many other books to read that month, and then it was also just like I had other videos to film, like so many reasons, but I had to like told myself to wait, and so that kind of like again subconsciously like started to nag at the back of my mind, like read me, and so that was like another big thing. But I did love this book so much, and it's incredible. And I do think too, this is a great one. I would say read the whole series, but after Fourth Wing to dip into this one. It's not exactly the same at all. This is vampires and just, it's different, but it's still this fantasy, there's romance, there's just so much to this that I think it would be a good one to start after Fourth Wing while we wait for Iron Flame, you know? Anyway, though, that definitely didn't help. I also think I started off my next video, I read one other book, but then I read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This book is so good, and it's like, it's honestly like romance, like not, it is romance, but I feel like there is so much to this book that I feel like it's just, you're addicted to it. Like, you literally cannot put it down. And so obviously it's not fantasy, but it has the same draw as fantasy because there's so much depth and so many things going on, so much excitement. Like, I feel like there was never a dull moment, and that's what I love. Like, sometimes I feel like romances, they kind of have to drag on. You kind of have to learn about these characters. I don't know how Hannah Grace did it, but she did it in a way that like was not boring ever. Like, not even one page I could say, oh, rip that page out. Like, no, it was just like incredible. I was hooked. And honestly, like, I started it off and I was not obsessed because obviously it's not fantasy. But then when you get going, you get going. And so I was obsessed. And I don't think it helped because all the other romance books I read after this were not like this. And so obviously no book is going to be the same. But I do really think that just the combo of things, and then I have one more book, but just the combo of everything really screwed me over. Because then I eventually read Bittersweet Memories by Katharina Moore. This was the last book I read in July, and this was the book that after this I didn't pick up any other book. Actually, I did pick up one, tried to pick up one, and I couldn't start it. I was like, no. So this book is just incredible. I bought stickers. I almost bought like a limited edition version of it. Like, I was living, breathing this book. This book is so incredible. This is a romance book, but again, it's same kind of, it's not similar to Icebreaker at all, but it's similar in the way that it has this kind of draw and this hold on you the way like a normal like a fantasy book would, you know what I mean? So this is a romance, so that's why it's kind of different. But there's just so much action. The way I almost call her Katharina Moore did this book was incredible. There's two different parts, one where they meet as like kids, and then the second part is when they're adults. So it's like childhood lovers, and it's amnesia romance. What is the other thing? Best friends, brother's older brother, boyfriend's older brother. There's so many like tropes and things. It is so good. And honestly, like, Katharina Moore has definitely become one of my favorite authors of life, and this book is incredible. I stopped reading after this. I was like, I'm stopped breathing after this because I'm like, there's nothing that will be this good. So again, those to me, again, the combo, I think, of everything really did not help me. And then after that, I was just like, wow, not gonna read again. I was like, I'll just watch some TV. I think too, I didn't bring them out here, but again, there are some books too that I just felt like after, like, in between kind of these books that I was like addicted to, I read so many books that like I expected would be on the same level and were not. Like, it was just a combo of like, not disappointments, but like they were a little below like my standard of like what I love. And so I just was like, I think it didn't help. It was like I was supposed to love those, now I don't, and I love these ones that I could never like top. Like, I'm just screwed. I always felt like I was like, there was no coming back. That's what it felt like, for real. Okay, again, before I give you like my advice, a few things that did not help at all. Like, I honestly don't recommend. Don't just pick up any book. Don't just randomize, blindly pick, and try to start a book. I feel like if you, again, to each their own, this is my experience. Like, I felt like if I just did that, I would not like the book as much. Like, it would just be like, I was not giving the book a fair shot because I was not in the headspace to be reading. I don't think that that's a great idea. Don't pick it up. I feel like you need to, first of all, ask yourself, what would make me read again? Even go to the bookstore. If you need to buy a new freaking book, buy a new book and just ask yourself what you want to read. If it's literally like, I don't want to read, write it out. Ride the wave out, because again, mine was only 5 days. Some people could be months. Some people could be weeks. Like, it's okay no matter how long. Sometimes you do have to ride the wave. Other times, you could be your biggest blocker, if you will. I don't know, what is that called? Your biggest something opponent. Like, you could be telling yourself, oh, I really want to read fantasy, but you're like, but I gotta read these romances, and then you just don't read anything at all. So kind of, again, ask yourself, think about that. That's one thing, but it did not help to just go pick a random book. It also didn't help trying to like force romances down my throat. I was like, maybe if I just read more and more romances, my gears would switch to romance, and it just was not like that. So again, to each their own, could help, could not. But like, for me, it was just like, I needed to read fantasy. There was no reason for me to try to be forcing myself to read romances. And then the last thing was just that I tried this book. and I honestly almost was like, I'm never reading again. This is How to Love Your Neighbor by Sophie Sullivan. No one wanted to tell me that this was in third person, but this is in like hard third person. I know there's like a third person where Tessa Bailey, I don't think this is the same as Tessa Bailey's third person. There's a third person that's like, it's called something, because like Harry Potter's written in it. It's like third person. Actually, I don't know, because it seemed like I was just like appalled by the harshness of this third person. If she'd had to lay down money on which of her motley crew would cause the most trouble, Grace Travis would not have picked the whatever. As she waited for tequila, whatever. I was just like, this is like harsh. And then I would look through and I'm like, nothing sparked any sort of joy in me. I was just honestly put off. I was like, I cannot read another book. So for me, third person did not help, especially if that you do not like third person. Don't even try to force yourself. Like, I feel like for me, it would have, if I would have like forced myself to read that book, I would have stopped reading for a long time. I'm not kidding. I was so put off. Okay, and then real quick, my best advice, obviously read what you want when you want it. There should be no sort of obligation to read any book, you know, whether it's this obligation to read what everyone's talking about. I honestly, there are so many books that like people love that I just don't really like, and so I'm like, I'm gonna stop. Like, I'm gonna read, like, there are books, so many books that like I'll hear every now and then. I'm like, I want to read those. I don't want to read the ones that are viral or TikTok famous or whatever, because I'm like, first of all, I've had such bad luck with a lot of them, but also it doesn't help me. Like, I'm not sitting here wanting to read them really, unless like they're really like calling to me. But other than that, I'm like, I'm not gonna read it just because everyone else is reading it, basically. Again, there's no reason to not read what you want. And so even if you feel guilty because you bought all these books and you don't want to read it, just read what you want, man. Go to the store, buy a new book. Do you. It's for fun. It's not, I'm a very like task-oriented person, so I feel like I have to complete something at all times. And so I'm like, I want to read 100 books this year. So I'm like, I gotta read all the books on my TBR. Gotta do this. And I'm like, I gotta read the Harry Potters, right before Christmas. I've always been like that. And so I feel like, I kind of put that pressure on myself. I'm like, I can't buy another book. I can't. I'm like, for what? For who? Why? There is no reason, Why do I need to read 100 books this year? Because I want to, but like, other than that, there is no one who's waiting to collect, like, oh, like, hey, did you read your 100 books? No. Like, so I'm like, just read what you want, man. Like, however much you want. Don't even force yourself to read too much. Like, if you really are done for the night, be done for the night. Sometimes I'm like, I want to watch YouTube, so I just watch YouTube. Other times I'm like, I want to read for hours and hours. It just depends. Anyway, my second, advice was just finish the series, man. If you're in this series and you're loving it, don't just finish the freaking series. Even if you have other books on your TBR and you are addicted to the series, finish the series, get your closure, girl, do it. I know, like, obviously some series are not out, and I'm leaning toward buying books where at least most of the series is out, and not, even if, like, not just one, because that I don't love. Like, again, Fourth Wing really wrecked me just because there's only one of its kind, and I'm like, come on. Some other series I know, like, are still in the works. Like, even The Serpents and the Wings of Night it's a 3 like set series, if you will. The first one is The House of Night, which is the Serpents and the Wings of Night series, and then the second one will be like either The House of Shadow, and then the third one maybe The House of Blood, whatever it is. It's like 3 sets, so I can get closure in this first set, but obviously there's more. Anyway, so I was okay with that. But I mean, like, if it's like, so I'm trying not to just buy like first books in a series and have to wait months and months and months to buy the rest. But, if you're not like that, or you don't got the willpower, like, if you don't want to do that, whatever, then do you, obviously. But like I say, finish the series. Last but not least, just want to talk about the book that got me out. The book that done did it for me. This is King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair, and I really like this book. I did originally give it 5 stars, but I think I'm gonna scratch that and give it 4 stars, because there is like this big thing that's kind of like it's not necessarily supposed to be a plot twist, because like you kind of know the whole time it's happening, but like I feel like it was supposed to be I don't know, it's supposed to be surprising in a way. I don't know. But anyway, this book, I was literally staying up till 2 a.m. the one night reading this book because I was addicted. Oh my gosh, not Chris Roberts. Scarlett St. Clair is amazing. First of all, I've heard she is, but like she really is. And this book is just so good. So it's vampires again. It is fantasy, obviously. It's like almost like more medieval times. So there are kings and like there's this whatever. I'm doing a whole reading vlog with this book. So fresh not, but I really was just, I don't know, it really hooked me. It called me in. The first few pages, I think that's the thing with fantasy too. Good fantasy will jump right into the action, and that's just will always do it for me. So it's like there was an army of vampires encamped on the outskirts of my father's kingdom. That's the first sentence. Like, yeah. Like, what are they doing there? Like, is your father a vampire? Like, what's the tea? Tell me all the juicy tea. Let me know. Let me know what it is. And so, I just wanted to read this, read. And so, no, it's not like my number one favorite book at the end, but I read it and I'm reading again. And so, I'm a very happy gal. Anyway, guys, really, that's everything I just wanted to talk about. If you want to chat, definitely let me know down below. Again, reading slumps are very personal, you know? Like, don't feel like, oh, you can't call it a reading slump because it's only lasted a few days. It's a reading slump. If you have no drive to read, then it's a reading slump. You heard the definition. If you try to read and you just can't seem to start or finish a book, it's a reading slump. I do have to say, starting a book is obviously the hardest. So sometimes, you know, if you get past the start, you're good. But again, you know, it's to each their own. It's very personal. I've seen people who have months reading slumps, and I'm like, yeah, can't relate. But the 5 days that I did, it felt so weird. I was like, oh no, like, what am I doing? So, you know, whatever. Again, yeah, if you want to talk, definitely let me know down below. I feel like that's everything. Bye, nerds.